Who is a digital marketing consultant and what do they do?
Digital marketing consultant could have an array of different responsibilities. My forte within digital marketing and what I lean into are the paid search, paid social ads. But then I do have sometimes smaller clients that will ask me for help with other areas such as content marketing, social media management. Um, but those are mostly my forte. I think the title itself can open itself up to different areas within digital marketing as well.
Reflecting on your early childhood experience, what are the particular areas of interest that sparked this passion for the profession of marketing consultant?
So I would say super early on when I was a kid, I loved giving presentations. And I mean, like being a small kid, like below 10 years old, and having a room full of stuffed animals. Like I would present anything I was learning. I would read a story to them. Maybe if I read the same story a million times, like change the story, which I think is really important within the realm of marketing, is being able to kind of create a story around whatever is going on with your performance.
You graduated from Pace University, live in school in New York. How was that experience?
Tremendous. I actually am a big fan of what I got from my education there. I started off being a liberal arts major within the school and then switched to Lubin. Life at Lubin, it's just you feel the drive, the energy from other students. I definitely felt that among my peer set. Um, they have a mentality of like work hard, play hard that some of the professors would even encourage of just like, okay, you guys finish this, you guys can go off and like have fun now kind of thing. So that was incredible. And then also the location. Lubin has different campuses, but the school that I went to was in New York City. And so a lot of things are super fast paced. And there's also New York City is also known as like a hub for advertising. It's what brings a lot of money there is the commercialization of things. So I think it all kind of like aligned in that way for me.
Did you get a lot of inspiration from the city itself?
I was inspired by the people I met in the city, I would say. So during my college time, like many students, maybe not like many students actually, but so during my college time in New York City, I had friends that had like a lot of internships. And so I did interning. That was quite the experience because I really liked working in some of those offices. I just knew like the environment was good. It just wasn't maybe the specific area in marketing that I wanted to do. But then also, I had like side jobs working at like restaurants because I had to make my ends meet. I wasn't fortunate enough to have like allowance money and stuff like that, like some people do. But so I had to work a lot. And some of those jobs, I would work as like a hostess or a waitress. And people would often tell me, like, oh, you're great at talking to people. So I think that also led me into feeling more confident about my role that could evolve within marketing because you have to do a lot of client facing things. Um, Not always, but I think those are some of the areas that I excelled in.
Was there a moment during your college experience where you understood that, yes, this is the thing that I want to do?
Yes, I would say twofold. One, mostly being around the environment of a work hard, play hard mentality. That honestly, like, had been maybe my motto for the first like 10 years of like, not the first 10 years, but into the that decade of being in my 20s. And beyond that also, there was this one experience. I don't think I got to tell you this before, but there was a dining service that just wasn't getting a good reputation among the students. They like were shut down, and um essentially I talked to them to see if there's anything I could do to help. And I don't even know where that came from because like it's not like I offer help to random people all the time, but they were able to tell me about like a new advisory board that they were creating. And so I got to do a lot of content marketing and event marketing through that, which also was very enticing at the time because of the way it paid me. And then also I learned a little bit more hands-on about like, oh, this is what I want to do. I definitely want to stick to marketing. I didn't know exactly what, but it was something I was willing to explore.
Could you give an example of a project that you did?
All right. So one project I got to do at school was running a simulation. I believe it was for like actually it was for camera equipment. It was all online, and we had to get into random groups. And lo and behold, my group, no one wanted to do anything. Like we met up that same day after class to try to delegate who's going to do what. And they weren't big on, we weren't like close friends or anything. So like texting was hard because no one would respond. I think that was the only class we had together. And then I remember my role in that group was I'm going to handle all the reporting, all the presentation aspects. And the reporting was really just within the presentation. It's not like we owed weekly reports or anything. So the other folks in the group, they had to like buy the simulation package and the textbook for us all to like read. And yeah, we met up. I remember like a day or two before the class project presentation, we were supposed to like meet up. That didn't happen. And then I found them in the library the morning of, right before the class, and we scrambled to put everything together. I think someone did buy the program, but they never actually like did anything within the program. And they were supposed to like, choose a toggle option for every year or whatever that changed in the simulation. And because of that, that made it so much more interesting. But they were a fun group in general, like personality wise. So we kind of just push came to shove. We were able to create our project presentation and figure out what our story was within like 2 or 3 hours right before class. And we killed it. Like I got high fives after that presentation. I was so bewildered. I was just like, oh my gosh, I love this. I love doing reports and being able to like present to people. I definitely don't do that last minute thing at work, but there are sometimes moments where at work you do get like last minute presentations or edits that you have to make, and you still have to like kill it the next day or the same day. So,
Were there any internships that you find valuable during your study time?
yes. I think all of them, I learned something from the internships. Um, so I got to work at like a showroom for a boutique luxury swimwear that taught me I don't want to be a fashion buy. It was fun, but I couldn't see my life like that. And there was another company that had a really fun office, like the snacks, amenities kind of things. And that was a cool experience. That was, I think, for like PR. And then I realized I don't want to do PR. I actually still stay in touch with, they had like a COO, a new COO that started like after me, and I still stay in touch with him because he saw how they didn't really, sometimes internships don't really mean that you're going to get a lot of work or experience. And so he saw that I was kind of like twiddling my thumb every now and then. And he got me into other things more like bookkeeping, which didn't help from the marketing side, but definitely helped from like the side of, oh, I need to start my business and I have to pay attention to bookkeeping.
While you're a student, there is a lot of subjects on marketing, I would assume, and a lot of theoretical background that you have to memorize and understand before you enter the field. What is your main takeaway from college?
My main takeaway from college was really that you can have all the book smarts in the world, but it's not enough until you actually get experience. And then, really, the second one being around connection, which I think I would want to lean into more, is that sometimes you don't realize the connections that you're making. And it's not to say you should be like a social, I think they're called like a social climber or something, where you only meet people that are going to help you like get to the top. Not at all, but when you have the opportunity to meet people like in a genuine environment, I think that's something that if you know if you feel okay with it, but you could like lean into like nurturing that. So some of my friends that I met from like before school started, we had to do orientations, and I didn't wanna go to PACE at all. Because so the background with, like, being a philosophy major at first, I wanted to study international relation. I was simply going to PACE because I needed my mom to sign off on my loan as a guarantor, and because of that, I was miserable when we had to do like orientations before school starts, so you could get to know other peers and get to see the school. Maybe I think we had to like sleep over, which I was so opposed to. I thought that was very almost like inappropriate, but I was just really trying to find every reason under the sun to not go. But anyway, so I became really good friends with like the people I met that during that orientation that I didn't even want to attend, like I went in being miserable and I came out like actually feeling kind of good about going to that school. Although in my mind I thought I was still going to go maybe to like California and study philosophy and do X, Y, and Z with my life. And so that just kind of reminds me of the value of connections. Also, some of my professors there too, I remember they helped me find some of my first, I didn't get the jobs, but they found some of the first roles I would like apply to. I thought I wanted to get into sales marketing. Not really good at sales. Not like hardcore sales. I could maybe like influence your decision to buy something, but like hardcore sales is not for me. But yeah, so the value of having people that like believe in you, support you. I think that also was something that later on was echoed by one of my former bosses, where he was just like, Jasmine, you need someone that like supports you in your day to day. So is willing to tell you when you do something wrong, but also willing to cheer you on when you do something right. And maybe that's because I'm a millennial, but it just became so true to me. And I was like, okay. But then he also mentioned, I forgot the exact word, but someone else to be able to kind of like, um, I'll have to find the specific word later on, but it's someone who's like willing to almost be like a sponsor for you. So later on in your work life, it's important for someone to like actually believe that you're going to go far ahead and be able to tell other people like, hey, she deserves or he deserves a raise or they deserve a raise. So the value of connection was a strong point within the college time, the college experience that I had, I would say.
And how did you build those connections?
For me it was easy to do this because of my personality, but I would do everything under the sun. I also okay, so to be very honest, I met a lot of people through parties. So
That's a great way to socialize.
yeah. I mean, New York City was like the perfect place for me to do that. And like, there's all different types of parties. I would go to almost every type of party that I could get into kind of thing. But I know some of my friends that were like, let's say, I did have like a handful of friends or connections more so now that were studying like theater or something, and they would just hang out with theater kids. So I guess that experience of like maybe find a way to get out of your comfort zone. And for me, it was like going to all these parties, meeting different people, and through them, not just getting something out of that relationship, but being able to offer them some help too. I remember I had this like one friend who was from like Latin America and she didn't have somewhere to dorm. So I ended up helping her. And I feel like maybe the universe saw that because at some point I didn't have somewhere to dorm and then my friends helped me and I was just like, "Oh my gosh." So yeah, breaking out of your shell, just going out there because at the end of the day, I don't think anyone is really going to care about how you presented yourself the first time like years later. Like no one's sitting there thinking like, "Oh, he wore that black suit again" or something, to a party. So yeah, getting out of your comfort zone.
After you graduated, how did you land your first job?
My first full-time job, I actually didn't get it in marketing. My first full-time job it was from a friend's parent who owned a business. And through that, I didn't do marketing related things. I had to do accounting things like, oh, what was it? I had to do like tax reports. I had to process like employee comp things. And I was just like, what am I doing here? But I never stopped looking for a marketing job. I just I was that story of like someone who gets the thousand no's until they get a yes. And part of it was like learning also where to pivot. So at first, I didn't really know what marketing encompassed. The digital marketing that I do now was all like from small steps that I took throughout the journey. But at first, I thought I was going to get into sales. Like a lot of my professors, people that I met are just like, you'd be great at sales. I don't know why they said that because I never landed a sales job. Maybe the prospecting part, like, because when you look at certain careers, I think there's a lot of niches going on within them. So maybe prospecting and sales I could do. I just can't really close a deal. But so I tried that and I wasn't getting a job. And then finally I got a job in TV ad sales. I met so this is also part of like networking, I guess I would call it. It's not within everyone's comfort zone, but finding opportunities, especially if you live in a big city, to like network, there's always going to be something. I reached out to people who presented at my college, and I was just like, "Hey, I think I'm interested in this. Do you have time to chat about it, grab a coffee or something?" Every now and then, they would just be open to having like a phone conversation, not really meeting in person. And then from there, depending on how the conversation went, they would invite me to maybe another conference, networking gathering of sorts that they would have. And I'd meet more people, and they were so helpful. They were so kind in so many ways. They would just literally, they wouldn't necessarily take me under their wings and be like, train with me, but they would be like, "Oh, this is Jasmine. She's a great student." Even if they didn't know my grades, they'd be like, "She's an amazing student at Pace. Like, she wants to try to find a job in this. Can anyone help her?" And I would feel I didn't know that was coming during these networking events. So it caught me off guard, but nonetheless, I was able to like meet people there who kind of would share their experiences or what they were doing. And then from that, I would learn too of like, okay, this is cool, or no, that's definitely not for me. And I think through that, I found out that I didn't have to do like, I guess the sales thing that people think of, like going door to door or the phone calls. And I was able to, I think, get hooked up to a recruiter who specifically works in like ad sales, and they helped me get the job in TV sales.
Was that an agency?
I believe so. I don't remember the name. But there are a lot of agencies out there. I would say be wary because now with the saturation of all these companies that exist, like some might not be as legit or some of them are like robos or something. So just always do your research. But that agency helped me get that job. I think they also had me applying to other jobs too, because when you work with a recruiter that's more of like a headhunter, instead of someone that's just like talent acquisition within a company. So a headhunter that has clients in different industries, they'll ask you about like what you want out of the role versus just telling you like this is all we have to offer. And that way they help you find like a good fit that you might not know exist. Some of the things I was looking for at first, I was just like, I think I want to be able to travel. I think I heard someone was getting paid to travel. So I was just like, I want to travel too. And I don't think they had that kind of opportunity. So the next best thing was the TV ad sales company, which was great. And yeah, I got my foot in the door of just getting into like marketing. And finally, I was like at peace. I was making not that much money or great money, but I was at peace knowing that, like, oh, I'm finally doing something with my career that is aligned to the major that I spent 4 years studying.
And what exactly did you do there?
So TV ad sales, I was working in operations. It was a lot of paper pushing, so not fun. Also, it was before a lot of commercials could exist on digitized TV platforms like a Netflix or a Hulu. I know we complain about that now, but it also opens doors to different jobs out there for people. So at the time, I was really just working on commercials that were getting pushed through different daytimes. So processing paperwork that tells a system like this 1-800 commercial has a time slot in the daytime for 30 seconds. This specific commercial, though, it has to be like tape A. And the same company bought a midnight time slot for tape C. That's 20 seconds. So I was doing a lot of that. And it was slow-ish. It was just tedious. And then I met someone there that helped me understand that I wanted something different. And I sometimes have this like weird mentality that I could just do anything. So that helps me with my confidence if I like want to do something that is kind of like, why am I doing this? So I ended up talking to, it was a small company. It was about like maybe 35 people. Spoke to one of the co-founders. It was really like the son of the original founder. And I was just like, hey, I think we could come up with more like revenue sources if we tried X, Y, and Z. And that was within like social. Cause I thought I had experience in college doing like social media management. Why can't I offer it to him? Again, no one prepped me for this. I just decided one day I was gonna like hold my breath and do it. And this man is like, he seems like a very gentle guy, but then he's also like 6'3" or 6'4" and just always serious. And I was just like, oh, so intimidated. Um, but it was something I knew I had to try because I didn't want to push papers. The people that I worked with were great, but also I didn't feel as inspired around them. I think I would come up with these crazy ideas, not necessarily to like implement, but I also love sci-fi. And so I thought to myself, there was at the time like scanners where they could like capture something that's written down. And I was just like, oh my gosh, if only someone could create, or if we could create, because then we could monetize on this, right? Like the company can. If we can create something that captures the data off of these like paper that we have to type anyways, like that would be cool. And I remember sharing that with my direct team, and someone was just like, that means we have no job, Jazz. And I was like, that means we have a different job. um, but yeah, so that was a cool experience, my first job.
Could you elaborate more on the social experience that you mentioned, going digital?
Yeah, for that company, right? So that company had access to a lot of broadcasting stations. One thing that they really prided themselves in, and correctly so, because like they actually did this, was there's a lot of non-cable stations that didn't have a big viewership, but through they mostly helped with like the advertising aspect of it, like the TV ad sales. But I think they also helped them get ideas of like how to get more viewers, and so that was their main thing. But again, because I felt like we it almost felt like a waste of time, not for me necessarily, I'm just saying for the employees in general, because there was so much potential that we could be tapping into. And again, growing up with all the ways that the world has been digitized, I was just like, why aren't we more digital? Like this makes no sense to me. um
And that was back when?
Oof, this was like 2015, maybe 2015. Yeah, 2015. Maybe the end of 2014. But so and like Netflix already existed. It didn't have commercials, and I wasn't thinking like, oh, let's put commercials here. But I was just like, no one knows these cable stations. You're trying to get more viewers. Why not do something in social? Like at the time that became like a hot buzzword is what can we do on social? Like how do we get more people to like our profiles and things? So I ended up after having that conversation with the one of the head honchos, he ended up saying, all right, what do you have? Like, what do you got for me? And I was just like, oh, I didn't expect any of this. I didn't know what to bring to the table. He gave me like a month to work on a proposal, a rough draft of a proposal and like what this would entail. And essentially, I ended up kind of creating like a scope of work without knowing this at the time. But now that I know like some of these aspects of the role, I created like a scope of work for potential clients. I drafted competitive analysis of like um, what other cable or non-cable networks were doing at the time, from a social media perspective, and like what doesn't, kind of creating like their first best practice series, and then also just including like a one sheeter of benefits as to like why they should do this. And in reality, I just didn't want to have to push paper anymore. And I wanted to do something a little bit more creative and hopefully something that would give me the ability to have more projects under my arm and work with like different different projects that also use like Excel. Cause then that meant I got to like download data and look at analytics. It was interesting because this did not it didn't win me anything. My boss just decided, "Thanks so much for putting all this effort, but we're not ready to expand in this." And then lo and behold, he was actually having side conversations with someone that he knew that I think was a I don't know if she was like a tenured professor, but she was like a professor at a school in New York City. And she had advertising students. And her student ended up interning and then getting hired for the thing that I was proposing. And I was just like, come on. I was so sad. And I got to talk to her a lot, which was great. But eventually, I can't remember if she ended up getting fired or she got fired or if she quit. But it didn't work out for the role, and I remember she had, like, similar issues that I had. Her presentations were a little bit more formal looking than what I had going on, but, all in all, had, like, the same content. I was just like, "Okay, I need to do this," and that was also the first time I, like, quit a job and didn't have something necessarily lined up, and so that was scary, but everyone there was supportive, even, like, the owners of the company, they're like, "You're a responsible girl. You got this. You'll figure it out." And I'm like, "Thank you."
And what happened after that?
So, life got more interesting. I decided to go to Thailand. Before going to Thailand, I wasn't like a well-versed traveler. I went to Peru because that's where most of my family is from, and then I would every now and then go vacationing, maybe to like DR or something. But I hadn't really gone to Europe. I hadn't gone to like Asia, let alone anywhere in Africa or really anywhere in South America except for Peru. And in any case, so as it relates to work, I it was around a time before like travel bloggers were really a thing. And it's not like I wanted to be a travel blogger, but I knew that like I couldn't just go out there and do nothing because I needed to have something to kind of like structure my trip. I knew where I wanted to go, I knew how I wanted to spend my money, but I didn't know what to do with my time, which is probably more precious than money. So I kept thinking back to some of the comments I got from my peers or some of my good friends' parents and my own parents of like, what are you going to do out there? Like, how are you going to survive? You're going for how long? I was trying to go indefinitely, but then birthdays are a big thing in my family. So I was like, okay, mom, I'll come home for your birthday. So that gave me 3 months. And I forgot how, I don't think it's the same name anymore because I checked recently. There is a website, or there are websites out there that help get you connected to different startups. And I thought they would be all US based. So I was hoping to work remotely because I had not a full time, I had a part time during college that I found that this guy hired me for. And I was like, I could do this again. And lo and behold, I found something in Thailand. It was with this guy who's actually Italian, and so he was looking for a native English speaker to help him with a wide range of really like online things, like help me fix up my website, help me take photos of the product, help me run my farmer markets, help me do X, Y, and Z, which was fun. And I decided to go for it. I never met the man. I never like traveled alone ever. And I decided to jump on a plane and go to Thailand and just do this. I'll tell you though, that experience was so sickening. I can be confident in like talking to people, but at least I'm comfortable. Like we're in the States, or, like I know there's like a bunch of English speakers around me or something, or like I have monies or a key to my car, like I have a ways of escaping essentially. In Thailand, I remember landing there and it's a long flight from the East Coast in the States. Oof, I got sick to my stomach. I thought I was going to like explode or barf or like just like pass out. And I didn't get traveler's insurance, which I don't recommend, but I didn't want to spend too much money at the time. But I made it. I made it and it was a great experience. And it led me to getting into advertising in the way that I do it now.
What part of Thailand are we speaking?
Bangkok. It was actually a really good area of Bangkok too. I mean, the whole Bangkok city is great, but it was Prompong, so there wasn't a huge cultural shock. I was in an area that was very touristy, I would say. So it had local markets, but it also still had like English speakers and like a really good transit system. transit system. Yeah. So yeah, not too bad. Not too bad for my first random visit to Thailand.
And
Yeah.
what did you like most and hated most about that job, if there is any?
Yeah. So I think, um,
Because working in the US is one thing,
yeah.
but working in Asia is another thing.
Yeah. Well, especially with the startup in Asia versus here, I think I learned, or maybe, I don't know, I haven't worked in a lot of startups here, like fresh startups, like before they get like beyond their Series A fund. And I don't even think this guy, I think this guy was like working solely off of like the money that he had made, which is, I don't know. I guess he was able to stretch it because it was in Thailand. But essentially, the thing that I think I disliked the most, just so I ended on a good note, the thing I disliked the most, and it was common among some of the other people that worked with him, was that he's just very strong-willed about his mindset of like what to do for the company, despite it maybe having like a little bit stagnation. So I remember most of the other people that were hired, they were actually like French. They came through this like French program of like, I think in France, I don't know if it's still being offered, but they came through that French program. I'll leave it at that. And um, they're like, Jazz, the one downside is he doesn't always listen to ideas, you know? And so with some of the marketing that we were doing, it was kind of like throwing a million balls to the wall. And even if something stuck on the wall, like we still had to keep throwing a million balls. And it was like, we don't really have a target market, you know? Like, sure, this could be something that everyone appreciates, you know, from moms to like fitness people to like teachers to kids, etc. But like, we need to start somewhere. So I think that was the biggest challenge for me, but also that's something that you experience on a day to day, not day to day, but with like any client, I would say. So I think that also prepared me for that, is really learning how to work with people when they don't fully agree with you, but in the setting of like in the marketing sense. And then, but what I really liked out of that job was also the, I would say, plethora of opportunities that existed with it. So I went in thinking that, oh, I was just going to help with taking photos and uploading them to the website and like redoing the website, you know. So I got like very fundamental SEO down, but then also some content marketing, social media marketing. It led the path to also helping me understand like he was hoping to scale. Our biggest issue before scaling was just the educational bit of it. Like no one wants this cricket pasta. It's in a growing field that like is still growing.
Can we elaborate on that more?
Yeah,
It's
of course. I say it like everyone eats cricket pasta.
yeah, it's
So
pasta made out of insects.
yeah. And so what you see if you actually like read the labels, this one at the time, I haven't done research since. That was the summer, early fall of 2016. And so it's in a field called entomophagy, which is like eating insects. It's not so bad. I recommend everyone try it.
Why would you? Can you elaborate on
Yeah,
why would you eat pasta made out of insects?
that's a great question too. And this was part of the reason why it was hard to scale, is because like no one understood it. So it's like, who's gonna buy this? You can't, no. But so the education around it is it has a lot of protein per size. I don't want to say per square bit because I can't remember the exact size. It's actually really healthy. And when you think about the way that we have some of our foods processed, and not in the sense of like sugar refined like snacks or something, I'm talking about just kind of on the mass scale, when people are looking at crops that they're growing or even animals that they're farming, a lot of them can go through like different antibiotics or different chemicals, and they persist and live, right? It's almost like Darwinism there of like, um, the competition of the fittest. But crickets are so sensitive to that, or other insects, that they're going to die. So you can't necessarily like spray them with chemicals to make them like jumbo size, because like, one, we all know what size crickets are. And two, they're not going to like survive. So that makes them really healthy. The protein aspect, if you're really trying to get your protein in. Now the ethical side, if you're a vegetarian, do you want to eat this? that I will leave up to you or the viewers. And then also, if it helps to mentally accept it, they are like one of the long lost cousins of, I think it was like shrimps. They are related to shrimps. If you look at the anatomy, they have very similar characteristics. Not all insects do, but crickets in particular. So, if it helps you to try to like visualize that you're eating a very small shrimp or something, think of that. Um, but yeah, they're overall just really healthy. And so the way that some product makers do this. There's actually some here in the States. I think there were some on like Shark Tank, but so the one I was working with, I think he accounted for like 20% of the flour used to make this pasta was based off of like the cricket molding. And if you've ever had protein pasta or maybe chickpea pasta, it kind of has this like graininess to it. That's what cricket pasta tastes like. But a lot of the products also at that time that were being sold having the name of like any insects or just yeah, being advertised that they have insect protein in them because of the high efficiency in the protein making, they probably had less than 10% of the actual insect protein. So that was something that was supposed to be like also a really good feature for us. But I think again, the biggest issue was the education.
Did you plan to solve the educational aspect by social and digital?
I was trying to, I did. Yeah, I got into taking photos of food. Um, and so I would try to make pasta there and just like take a few different shots of it. It was interesting because I didn't really learn this. I learned this much later on in life. Like it clicked in my mind of sometimes what people do to try to boost awareness of something that technically already exists, right? The pasta aspect of it exists. They'll create additional, like, Instagram or social media accounts for that industry or for that type of product or brand that you're trying to sell, and then include that specific brand in it, And then if they actually do get to grow up, maybe they could sell like spots to other people, but they nurture this organic space so that they can organically sell you whatever product or service they're trying to talk about. It's like saying like, "Oh, look at all these different Nike shoes," and then, "Oh, look at this one shoe that like the small business owner like has made." So you already have a good following. Now you get to see something that's new that's not Nike related, that could help boost the brand awareness for other said small shoemaker brand.
So that experience lasted for around 6 months.
Yeah.
Why did you decide to come back?
Um, so I had so I came back in October. I still worked with him, but there wasn't that much to do from like a website photo shoot aspect. During the end of my physical time in Thailand, I had already started kind of shifting my responsibilities just based off of his needs, and he needed money. I didn't have money for him, but I realized, hey, you could probably call investors, right? I got that information, I think, just knowing that where I found him on that website, there were a bunch of people with this title called investor. And, you're in Thailand, you're trying to work, and part of your research becomes what you just looked at. And so I ended up leading more of his investor relation, which was great. I talked to so many great people. I met people in this field of entomophagy and that were like trying to make a difference in the world doing that. Like there's this one woman that is located in California, I believe, and finally she had an event in New York City, which of course I went to. She would do dinners where she would bring out cooked insects in different manners and maybe some wine and just tell you more about what's going on, and everyone there is already kind of like really into the small niche world. um and yeah, I ended up really getting into that investor relations side, but I don't know. Maybe it's something that in the future I'd like to try again, but it just at the time didn't seem like what I wanted to do. I like understood that it was distracting me from what I wanted to get into, which when I did my research, I was just like, "Oh, I need to put like paid dollars behind my marketing efforts," and I didn't exactly know what it was, but it was the paid search, paid social that I now know. So I started like boosting his Facebook stuff. I started doing little sales on like Google for him using ads. And I didn't know it was like a full-fledged thing until I was like, you know what? No, I'm not going to do this investor stuff. It'd be great, but I think the hard thing is too, which goes with that initial question of like, what were some of the challenges? Well, because he wasn't willing to, I think, really accept others' ideas, it became hard for me to like, okay, I could prospect for you, but now I feel like I'm wasting their time because they want you to kind of, give a little more to what they want because they're going to be giving you like $1 million or $500,000 to support your product. You kind of have to give them a little bit, compromise somewhere, which then wasn't happening. So it kind of made sense for me to leave that role at that point.
But would you agree that being a marketing specialist on cricket pasta gave you a foundation to be a marketing professional in any field?
Yes. Surprisingly, yes. Um, because of the nature of it, like of the niche category that it lives in, and the startup combined, I think those both gave me the experience of knowing like, okay, how do you make something grow if there's like almost little to no following behind it? You could have little to no following when you start like an Instagram account. Okay, sure. But you're probably doing something that people already know a lot about, whether it's traveling or eating out in like Boston or New York City or et cetera, but entomophagy, like there was such a big educational aspect to it. I think the important thing is just like realizing, okay, so this is his end goal. He wants to make money. It's not working, and then being able to kind of take that apart and understand. It's because no one understands this yet. And then bridging that gap. Also learning from him because he was, again, for someone that's like very new to like an emerging market, you have to do so much just to get attention. So I wouldn't say he spread himself out thin, but he was trying to do so much to try to build up the market. He was going to these conferences. He had us going to local farmers markets. So it was all it was helpful in the marketing sense and consulting side, and also just working with him because he has like a million different needs. So I kind of got to experience little aspects of things that I do now. And it also just helps with overall having those conversations with people to figure out what they need, especially if they're not like a huge brand that, just needs help with like running their Google ads, Facebook ads, or TikTok ads, or whatever else. Um, Sometimes it does come down to like, okay, they need website help or they need to refine their target market or things of that nature.
Where do you get the knowledge of how to operate with Google Ads and other tools like this? It's not a thing that usually is taught in college. So, how do you
Yeah.
learn that?
I think a lot of just trial and error. So once you at least can conceptualize, I have to get on Google Ads, doing a lot of research. And the great thing actually about some of these major platforms such as Google Ads, I think Microsoft even has it. Some people still call Microsoft ads Bing ads, so look into that too. Or like your Meta slash Facebook has this, but they have certification programs where you have to pay, I think, like, I don't know, a few $100s. So usually your company pays for that. You won't pay for that. But you have free certification programs from like Google, from Microsoft. At some point Twitter was doing it, but I don't know if X is still doing it. I haven't advertised on X since that transition. And then there's a lot of content out there on YouTube, or even on TikTok. They'll give you a little bit of something so that then you could like build off of that. So just being resourceful, I would say, because we have so much resource around us, and free resources too, if we can get connected to the internet and just start with that first curious question of like, oh, what is this? How do I do this? And then that'll kind of start to teach you of like, maybe these are the basics you should do. I think that's also important to know because sometimes you don't know what to look up, but it's like basics in X, Y, and Z, or like 101 in X, Y, and Z. And usually they will give you a good categorization of like, this is the foundation. This is what you should need to know how to do, how to like manage money on it, how to set up an account. And then that kind of brings you into that realm of like more experience without getting experience. And then actually ChatGPT is like really good at this too. And I haven't tried it across any other AIs, but for a while I contemplated like, should I start selling courses? And you could ask ChatGPT like, "Hey, I want to start a business where I sell courses on like programmatic ads." Like that's something I don't necessarily specialize in. Like DSP, it's a little bit different from the Google ads or Meta, Instagram, TikTok ads.
What is this P?
It's a great question. That's an honestly great question. I'm not exactly too sure. I think it's something about seller, some sort of like seller platform. So the way that a lot of our ads work is that they run off of like an auction. So it's exactly what you think of when you think of an auction. But it's happening in like milliseconds. So let's say, and I'm describing this because programmatic is based off of this, but I think in programmatic you get a little bit more levers and you get to see it a little bit more in real time versus Google. It's all based off of the algorithm that you're using. And then DSPs also allow you to work off of more websites versus Google. You have that luxury of doing it, but you don't have as much transparency or visibility into like the performance I think behind the websites, because Google is mostly for Google and its search partners. You have accessibility but less transparency if you try to run some of the ads across different actual websites. So um and they're hard to really like manage in the sense that like you could run $1,000, it'll go out within like an hour. You'll lose that $1,000 and you might not get anything from it. And then you realize that you have like a million websites that didn't necessarily tick off any of the negation flags that you may have had because you're saying like, "Hey, I don't want my ads to run across websites that might have nudity or other profanity and X, Y, and Z or like super extremist views." But then you realize as you're going through checking through the websites that actually ran, you may have run through a website that said like Run Dog Play or something, and it's a completely innocent name, but then the content is extremely foul, and it's like, oh, I just spent money on this. Versus DSP, I think you have like a better leverage of being able to run across like cleaner content.
I exactly had the same experience when I started my first company a lot of years ago. I tried it once, the Google Ads thing,
Mm.
and I was not experienced. I didn't do a lot of research. I just went on YouTube, saw a few videos, and decided that I could do this. I could potentially attract some customers to my company, uh, which was an event management company. But anyway, I invested around $300 in that, and I launched the ad campaign, and it was eating. The budget was eaten in around 10 hours. So I went to sleep, and I wake up, the money is gone, and I got like 100 clicks or whatever the analytics told me, and of course no live clients, no interaction. So clearly I did something wrong. Maybe it was semantics or something else, I don't know. But my experience with that was pretty sad. But I'm sure that there is a whole science to it, which I really want to get in.
Yes, totally.
So jumping back a bit from Thailand, you came back to the US and you started working as a search and social media senior analyst.
So at that company, I was hired to first work in paid search, which I thought was great, but I also thought, oh crap, now I won't be able to do any social things. But lo and behold, my first day, they're like, oh, you're going to do paid search and paid social. I'm like, okay, great. I don't know what that means, but let's go. So within that company, it was mostly learning the basics and how to run these campaigns. So to the point of what you had mentioned, learning how to set up with best practices in mind for that. Um, so running any the client's money. Most of my clients were again financial marketing services at the time. Doing keyword research. What is ad copy? How to make sure that my ad copy is engaging. And ad copy is really just like looking at the text within the ads. I wasn't actually like taking photos. It wasn't creative in that sense. But creative in the sense that like, oh, okay, so I only have like 30 characters for the headline, maybe another, now it's changed, but like 60 or 90 characters for a description line. How do I convey what I need to convey? Get a call to action in there and hopefully make a sale or really just get someone to like call the company, right, for that client particular. Um, Between that, the targeting aspect, and then viewing performance, which at the time, probably just because I was learning, it was, and maybe the way that overall the companies were talking about it, it was a very like high level learning of performance, but it's really important to view performance as a whole of like not just our channel, but how, by channel, sorry, I mean the marketing channel that I'm working on. So whether it's Google for search or maybe like a Facebook, Instagram for social, understanding how that plays throughout the consumer journey and what else is impacting that consumer journey that can also impact what I'm doing. Um, so that first role was mostly those, and then also learning some client management, and then learning how to run things on my own. Because what you find within some companies is that a lot of people don't have all the bandwidth in the world, but they still get a lot of tasks pushed onto their plate like they do. So some of my managers were a little bit less hands-on, just so that they can do, I assume, so that they could do other important things for the company. So then I had to, once I got grounded in the basics, start doing it on my own.
Could you give an example of working for a company and you're assigned a task within the scope of your job? What is a good example of the work that you do?
Good example. Yeah. So I think the foundational sense, because it's really encompassing more than that nowadays. But for search specifically, for instance, it comes down to, okay, so maybe they're selling like a specific t-shirt, or like a new line of t-shirts. So making sure that I understand what it is that they're selling, because that's all comes part of like the pre-planning phase. Understand what metrics to look at, because that aligns with their objective. So do they care more about getting the awareness out, or do they care more about like actually making the sale? And with that in mind, do they care about like the efficiency, or do they just have overall like $3,000 to blow within like a week or so, which is not really heard of. But so between those aspects of planning and then just the execution of it, building the campaign out, building out the targeting keyword sets, maybe adding in different audience targeting, what you see, I think it's a, I forgot the name of the film, but there's a film on Netflix that kind of documents how we target across social media. And a lot of that is similar to what you do in like DSP or even within Google, because a lot of things are, they were just cookie based tracking. We could get into that later on, but then there's other ways of tracking too, just based off of like other signals on your phone. So making sure that we're set up to track or to use some of those target signals that make sense for the brand. So we're not going to target someone that is looking for dog products, but maybe we look for someone that is into like fashion or has recently shopped for like discount items. Um, if the t-shirt's on sale, sorry, in my mind it was hypothetically. But so between that and then just managing the money correctly so we're not spending $300 if that's the entire budget. But then also being able to like check in on it. So, and this all comes from like learning. I don't think it's with anything, I don't think anyone's perfect, and I think sometimes they forget how to like QA, which means quality assurance. So making sure that something properly is set up properly and to the best that it can be. So when you launch something, it's not about just like setting it and forgetting it, like checking it within like the next hour to see how it's performing, maybe the next 2 hours to see how it's spending. Um, you should have like some sense of, okay, does this look common or does this not look common? If you haven't spent anything in like the last 2 hours, it depends on like what you're doing, but like maybe you should be seeing some traffic if you're trying to spend like $1,000 a day. It doesn't make sense to like see no budget all the time. So QAing, and then I would say shortly after that, not shortly after, but within like a week or so, be able to like check in performance again. I would also never launch anything on like a Friday or a Thursday, knowing that you have a long weekend coming up. Always have some sort of setup so that you can check in on it. But this way, also, if something weird happens, some of the platforms get really glitchy. So unfortunately, there have been moments where I like try to launch something on like a Wednesday, but then for some reason, usually the approval, we say 24, maybe 48 hours, but it's usually within less than 10 hours. It's within like a workday that you'll see something get approved. But we say that just because we do know that sometimes bugs do go on. So that gives us time to like reach out to any of our vendor partners, let's say on Google or Facebook side, which is also now becoming a little bit more difficult because they used to offer more, how would I phrase this? They would offer like more direct ways to contact them. Now it's all through like a third party like customer service.
Premium support.
Premium, very premium. Yes. They took that away.
And when did that happen?
When?
Yeah. Is it after COVID?
This is something that they probably didn't like officially announce, but slowly but surely, at the time I was working full time, so I had the luxury of being able to talk to someone personally, sometimes even like see them face to face. Because of how much the agency partner overall is spending versus just my client. But because of that, they would tell us, I got the emails from the partners or like in person saying, like, by the way, we're starting to roll out this new manner of getting contacted. You only contact us when you want to talk about like how much you want to spend and like plan, really building like a strategy. But if you have questions or if there are bugs, actually just communicate with someone on this uh, live chat of sorts or something. And that I could see where it's supposed to be helpful, but it just takes so much time because then you get put into a queue, and sometimes they don't know what your issue is. And yeah, the customer support isn't that great, but I think in the end it won't really matter in the long term. Yeah.
So after Reprise Media, you went to Wavemaker
Yes.
and you basically did the same thing?
Yeah. The only difference or the main differences were really across what clients I had. And then, so part of my experience with the last company led me to now be a manager. So it depends on the company. You'll have different roles. It's not like a five-step ladder necessarily. Sometimes they introduce other roles for other reasons. So in between. So you don't always just go from like being a senior analyst to, or sorry, being like a manager to like an associate director. Maybe now you have to do like a senior manager role. But in any case, so I was able to uh, step up across the ladder with that role in Wavemaker. I was a manager. I started off managing, I believe, anywhere between 2 to 3 people. And then by the time that I ended, I was managing six, which was great. And the other difference is really just the capabilities of the company. So they had a lot more learning, I think, enhanced experiences than at the time what I had at Reprise. And then also because I was a manager, now I also kind of got like not necessarily a budget, but now I could lead trainings, and I had so many lunch and learns because I love free food. But then I was just like, oh, they had um it almost felt like maybe twice a year type of trainings for like new hires, and I'm like, but we're getting new hires like all the time, and it would just be easier to teach them all at the same time, versus like if yeah, if we just got like one new hire every few months, fine. Like we could hold off, but if we're getting multiple, we could do it maybe on like every monthly basis or something. So just like being able to like teach a lot more, getting involved with others in the sense of like helping them build out their career. It was obvious some people didn't necessarily care for what we're doing, which kind of made it that could cause like a distraction. And it's not about like, oh, we want to fire you, you're not a good fit. It's about like, okay, but what do you want to do? How can I potentially help you get there? Like, do you want me to help you with like your resume or help you, I don't know, interview or something? And I think just being approachable in that sense too, that was something that I kind of lacked in my first experience, maybe because of like where I was in my own like career at the time. But it just didn't I didn't get that like right off the bat, that sense. And so I wanted to make sure people were included, people were seen, and people could get help if they wanted to.
So you started tutoring people, mentoring people to do the thing that you did previously. So that was like the next step for you, right?
Yeah, and I mean, all the roles too. I don't know if all the roles in the world or within these jobs work like this, but I was still hands on. So
So you're always hands on.
yeah, I'd say that with a breath because it's like now I could control that a little bit more, but before it was like, okay, so I technically by law, by contract, I signed up for this 40-hour work week, right? So it's like 8 hours a day. Okay, maybe like half that time is spent running around on client calls or internal meetings or just ad hoc meetings. And then part of that time, I'm making sure that everyone is set up for success. And then another portion of that time is like QAing everyone's work to ensure the client is set up for success. And then also part of that is like doing my own work. So I think a lot of my colleagues and I would joke around how it felt like it was the office, not in the sense that nothing is getting done, but it's just like we have to talk about so many things because there's so many pieces to the puzzle, and I love that communication aspect, but obviously like we actually got into this at some point of like do we have to have all these meetings, so trying to figure out how to improve our efficiency within meetings, how to just do them through email if it's not necessary. But yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot. I would not necessarily work 40-hour weeks. I would work closer to like 60-hour weeks because there's a lot I wanted to do and I wanted to do it well.
And then COVID happened.
And then COVID.
And COVID was the transition point for you to begin your own um, consultancy
Yeah.
work. How did that came to your mind, and what was the transition point like?
COVID happened. And I think it was right before COVID happening actually that I decided I want to or I started to consult a little bit, but that was mostly pro bono. I would go into events in the city really just to have fun or because my roommate was there performing and I got free food. But so some of these events were like networking events where people were trying to look for marketers. So you would get name tags that would say like your name and like who are you? Are you like a business owner? Are you a marketer? And I didn't want to lie about it, so I was just like marketer. But I didn't. I would show up late, and I was just like chilling, eating food, and like watching people or whatever. And then people would actually come up to me and be like, "Oh my god, you're a marketer." And I guess at these events, not a lot of marketers went to, but I don't know how these events probably could have used a better system for like recruiting marketers because
Could you mention what kind of events are we talking about here?
yeah, so one example, there was a Yelp event. I don't remember the name of I didn't like sign up or register for it because I went to see my roommate. But I yeah, this event I think was supposed to help drive local businesses to like meet advertisers so that they can help them advertise on Yelp. I don't exactly know all the other specifics around it. Like, were there specific Yelp advertisers that but so I went, and when they would see this name tag saying marketer, they would like flock to me, and I'm literally like midway, like shoving food in my mouth, and they're just like, "Hey, I wanted to talk to you about blah blah blah," and I'm like, Okay, I'll listen, like I'm just eating. And through that, I met some of my first pro bono clients, which was really cool. We just barely got started and then COVID hit. And one of my clients was actually like, it was a foot tour, yeah, a tour by foot company. So the nature being like they give you tours of like Brooklyn or Queens or specific areas in New York City that then you get to like see all this graffiti or other buildings and then you also maybe explore like the pizza scene or something. So COVID happened and we couldn't do that anymore. I was still full time for a while, but then also COVID, the way it impacted everyone, including myself, was kind of like what is happening. For a while I went back to my parents place outside of New York City, and that That was interesting because I think whenever I'm around my parents, and maybe this goes for everyone else, but it's just like they treat you as a kid, you know? So I was almost having this weird like identity crisis because I was working from home, right? But my family is very protective, so they're like, "You're not going back to New York City right now," and I'm like, "Crap!" And I could have easily left and done something. Although at the time I wasn't driving, I didn't even have like a license, so it would have been a little bit hard. But I could have gone through it. But still not something that for whatever reason I decided to do. So I was living with my folks, having this identity crisis while also having to like manage a team. And that was a bit of a learning curve too, because it's like, how do I say no to people when they have to get work done? You know? I definitely got my hand slapped. There was someone that sometimes like BS's, on the team, and you could sniff them out, especially once you're like a manager. Like it's really important for you to be able to sniff out people's BS, at least from like the work setting. And
BS
so
like if they don't get the job done.
yeah. Or if you correct the same mistake multiple times and it's like, okay, why aren't you paying attention? Like what's actually clicking in your mind for this to continue to happen? Because you want your what's that saying? Like you're as weak as like the weakest link kind of thing. And not in a competitive sense, but just kind of like if someone really doesn't get it, that's gonna drag down the rest of the weight. Because now other people are gonna have to jump in on that task that this person supposedly spent like the past 4 hours doing or something. So that means more work for me or more work for potentially someone else on the team. And I think the job that we have is pretty easy. I think it's just about like focusing, you know, and that focus can make the difference between like doing something within an hour versus 4 hours. Because it's we're not building rockets, we're not saving lives. So yeah, it should if you ever feel like in this workspace you're taking forever to do something, you might not be doing it right. But in any case, the COVID thing happened, and my parents, I think, still to this day don't really understand what I do. And my mom is a very sweet, generous woman, but she was like constantly at my door, like, Jasmine, come down, let's chat, kind of thing. Or like, hey, I made you some food, or like, here's a snack, But I'd be like midway through a client call, and COVID didn't slow down anything for me work wise. Some people got the I would say luxury of that. Sorry, that might sound not nice, but luxury in the sense that like I had some colleagues that had other clients, and they were like, "Oh yeah, I have like no work," and I'm like up to here with phone calls. Like almost my entire day is spent on the phone, and then I also have to like this is with like client work or just like my directors or like team reports, and then on top of that, I still have to make time for you know working with the associates, anyone below me, correcting any work, and then doing my own work. And on top of that, now I have this like pressure of my own mind, my mental health, which was degrading at the time. And my mom's here, just like Jasmine. I'm just like crap. So it was tough, and I think the stress of that also kind of reminded me of like you shouldn't be dying for feel like you're dying for a job. And I don't think at the time I think the team is wonderful, but I think they didn't really get that from me. And so it was a huge shock when I was just like, you know what, I'm actually going to step down for a bit. I did. I stepped away for like a month, and then they actually ended up rehiring me because they're like, "Hey, like we found you a different team. It's gonna be different, blah blah blah." And that was actually really nice of them. They like really they did want to see me succeed and give me this better environment or one that might be a little bit more aligned with where I was at the time. So that worked out. That was nice. But then throughout that time too, I was just like with all these other things happening during that 1 month that I took off. Again, I think I have this like innate sense of like I can't just like sit and do nothing. I have to do something, all the time. So I was reading up on a bunch of different things I never imagined because I was just like, I want to build a company, like why not? And I thought it was going to be in something completely different, but then I ended up just continuing what I'm doing, but as a consultant, so on my own versus like working full time. Um, and that was mostly just because I was just like, I want to own my own time. I felt like I didn't have time when I was full time to spend time like nurturing my relationships during COVID. Um, I felt like I was getting stressed and burnt out really quickly. And then like no one in my immediate family passed away from COVID, luckily, but I know that there were people connected to the family that were, and I didn't even have moments to like grieve for them. So that was really hard. And I remember thinking like those are some of the things that like people talk about on their deathbed is like, yeah, I had like a successful career, this and that, and I didn't get to see my family, and I was just like, oof, I can't do that. So I decided to take a step back. I tried working with a few people here and there, but again, I think it was just kind of like a no, I think this is where my path is going right now. And it's not to say I think right now I'd be open to a full time potentially, but I think it's from what I've learned is that I want to be a little bit more considerate and intentional about who I choose as a client, whether it's an agency and their clients or just like if I go in house or work with a partner. But I definitely want to be more intentional. And that's what working as a consultant has allowed me to do is live more intentional in that manner, which is nice.
And since everybody went digital in COVID, did you see a big opportunity for your business to jump in that situation?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. It's crazy. I slowly but surely transitioned away from just working with like financial service companies. I had small clients within the full-time gigs that I had that weren't financial services, but the majority of my clients were financial services. And so I started to move into like e-commerce space, e-retail, direct to consumer. These are all not even the same thing, but it's all in the micro sense of just like helping brands that have like products, yeah, products to sell. So I would say that, yeah, it helped. It helped me in that sense.
So you became a consultant, a self-employed consultant. Can you describe a day in the life of a marketing consultant who's working independently?
It usually starts with checking all my comms, so my communications of like email, text message, Slack, and anything else that the client might be using, but it's usually a combination of those. Checking that to see if there's any urgency across any specific projects or new things that came up. From there, just checking in on performance. So typically, we have a set budget that we want to spend, usually on like a monthly or maybe quarterly basis. But then it's important for me to be able to manage that even on a day to day basis. A lot of this is already automated, but it could be as simple as just checking in to make sure that, like, okay, this did meet expectations. It took 2 seconds. Let's get into the next thing. Um, and from there starting to take notes of performance. So some of this performance is correlated mostly on what reports that the client needs, usually some sort of like year over year, month over month, week over week type of report. That sometimes it'll vary depending on the platform. Sometimes they have Google Analytics. Sometimes the client has Tableau. Sometimes they don't have all that good stuff. Good stuff, I mean, because some of those platforms I just mentioned, they integrate data from different sources, which is really nice because then I don't have to pull from multiple sources. But sometimes I do have to pull from multiple sources. I had this one client who I had to pull from I think it was Google and then Facebook, Instagram. At least those are together, but it was just like downloading and then we had to upload it or I think share it with someone who then uploaded it into like a script based, like an SQL based spreadsheet. I think it was on Google too and that took forever. But so hopefully it's something that I have streamlined. For performance based and that's just so I could view trends overall. I want to know what's going on and is this expected. With most cases you'll have like a benchmark in mind too. And if you haven't ran this company, it's going to be something that is historical based or something just based across like industry knowledge. So I'll run my reports against that. And then let's say there's nothing really to flag. It's pretty like good performance week over week or month over month. Then I'll take deeper dives into maybe if there's like a test going on. A test meaning like maybe they have a new product that they just launched or a new landing page that we're trying versus the previous landing page we were using. Or maybe we just decided to use like new retargeting audiences. So viewing some of those tests, taking deeper dives where I can, because again, I want to be able to understand trends that are going on and speak to them because I should be able to bring those up to the client. I think that's what makes a good marketer or consultant, really, is being able to have these conversations without necessarily being prompted to have these conversations by the client. So with that in mind, I think that would take up most of my day, and between that, maybe some optimizations if needed. So I try to have a strategic way of looking at optimizations, really for account maintenance. So whether it's maybe twice a week at the beginning and end of a week, I'll take a look at keywords. Maybe if we're not spending so much there within, let's say, like Google, there's Performance Max. Maybe I'm just making sure that my product feed is doing well. By my product feed, I mean their product feed. And sometimes, if they're connected to like Google Merchant Center, you'll be able to see where you have products not showing, and usually you get good reasons like why they're not showing. It might be that they're not following like column rules that you have to follow when you like when they upload these like feed spreadsheets. So anywhere between those optimizations, just general account maintenance, and then any of my free time, I try to look for more clients because I like nothing is set in stone because it's not full time. It's not like, oh, this is your contract. You'll have like a 30-day notice. It's kind of like, oh, okay, we're gonna work together on like a rolling monthly basis. And you could get let go of at any time. And so recently, this past, what was it, like the past few fall, winter months, November, no, I think even October into like December, a lot of people were getting laid off. So some of my clients also wanted to either have someone full time. They didn't see the value of having someone as a consultant, which is fine. I totally get that. I think that could be a really smart marketing move. But also that just meant then I need to find a new client. And but I've been blessed in that. So a lot of my own endeavors and trying to find my own clients haven't necessarily been that great. Like my direct cold emails, cold calls, those cold outreach. A lot of my clients have been referrals, so I'm very blessed. But everything always just seems to align. It just continues to go down into my pipeline, which is nice. So doing that, and then also just making sure I'm looking at like my invoices, timesheets, depending on the client. So one, I also advise like the team. So it's nice because then I also have some touch points to do with the team members, making sure again that they're set up for success. It's using a lot of my experience from before to make sure that um, that this client is doing well.
How do you begin such a business?
It's a great question. I would say the method that I've used is just by telling some people. At first, I was actually kind of shy. I don't know if embarrassed is the right word, but I got like those feelings that you get when you're embarrassed of like, oh, I don't want to tell people. So I didn't really tell anyone. I think I recently made an announcement on like LinkedIn or something that I'm starting to do this because again, most of my clients have been referral based. So at the time I was just telling anyone who I think I would have like more close interactions with. Um, I used to take vocal lessons and I told my vocal coach because I was just letting him know, like, hey, I might not take vocal lessons for a while because I'm starting this new thing and I have to be smart about where I spend my money and or more strategic. And so he actually got me one of my clients. And so it's through that. One of my other former bosses, we spoke throughout COVID from time to time, and he's honestly like one of my favorite people, persons, if I said that correctly grammatically. But so he knew that I wasn't looking for full time, and then he also got me one of like my longest standing clients. So it's just for me, it's been mostly through referral and connections.
But what are the main steps to build a business like this? Because I would assume you'd have to build a website. Of course, finding clients is important, but what are the key steps that you took to build your own business?
So aside from looking at maybe like the actual setup of an LLC, because I want to make this legitimate, um, I ended up I did build a website. A lot of it was, I think, just mostly through conversations at first, to be honest. I had like a website, but I think it had like a what is it, like, announcement page of just like will be built out soon or something, with the company name, and um just try to figure out really like what it was that I was going to offer. uh in the states, I think most states, I guess I can't speak for all states, but some states have like a small business association. And they sometimes offer like free support in the sense of just having like a mentor. And so I found a mentor right off the bat because I was just like, I think I know what I'm doing, but I don't want to perceive that I know too much if I don't. And so I spoke to mentors who helped me kind of set myself up for success. So I ended up starting like a business plan, projecting out my expenses, figuring out if I was what route I was going to take, if I was going to go into something super niche and just focus on specific clients or broaden it out. They're really helpful and challenge you in the way that you want to think about things. Also, partly one of the big aspects is like how are you going to get compensated? Um, Knowing that you have to cover certain expenses, you have to pay your taxes still, you have in some states you have to buy into like the medical health insurance programs. Um, Traveling costs. Now I need a car, you know? Not to say my clients all paid for this, but in the sense of like, okay, so between this, my experience, how do I make sure I'm getting compensated depending on the work? Am I working off like a flat hourly basis? Am I going to work off of like a percentage of their revenue? Am I going to look at like a monthly retainer fee? For me, most of my clients have been yeah, mostly like hourly rate clients. The retainer fee I think could make sense, but just then with the type of work that we do, well, that I do rather, but we, as in people within the paid advertising space, tend to write reports, but or do presentations or suggest specific like outlines and plans, but then we always get like another page full of revision notes or something, or maybe the person still doesn't know what they want, and so there's like a lot of time spent there. So I did decide to do hourly rate versus like a monthly retainer. I think it would have been nicer to do a monthly retainer. But just making sure that goes back to just overall compensation, figuring out what that is, what your game plan is for the business, your niche, if that's something that you're going into. I didn't go the route of like doing an Instagram, TikTok page for this. A lot of people say I should. Maybe just the content side isn't like I want to. I want to spend more of my time like doing the consultation strategy basis of the work versus like now having to do Instagram. And because it's still relatively small, like I could hire someone to do it, but then I had to spend time and invest it in there too of like let's make sure they're doing it in alignment to like what I envisioned, you know. So far it's just the website.
What are the KPIs for you when you work with a client?
Those could vary. Those could be anywhere along the funnel, I would say. So, a funnel is the best way to look at a consumer journey when you're trying to push someone down like a pipeline. So, anywhere from like brand awareness, how do we gauge that, right? So, from the advertising sense, just looking at engagement rates, click through rates, maybe CPMs, cost per impressions, meaning how often do my ads serve, and those get served by the thousands. So, making sure you have just like a good return on those, the click through rate being your better sense of like ad engagement. Like, does this creative, does my ad copy intrigue people enough to get clicked on? So I would use that more for something that's around brand engagement or rather brand awareness. And then most of my clients are, however, like performance driven. So when you're looking at that, it's about, okay, are we reaching our revenue goals? And beyond that, are we doing this efficiently? Because they do care about performance efficiency. So something like ROAS stands for return on advertising spend. Or also maybe like our cost per acquisition, which some of the metric names vary by the different platform you're on, but overall, like you're just trying to get a sense for did we reach the sale goal and do we have efficiency behind that?
What is the back-end science in this? So there are these social media platforms that grind information on people, and they use that information to create audiences. Is that the correct way to perceive this?
I think that's one sense of it because then it's like how much money are you willing to put behind it and the ad creative side. And then thinking also, I think something that some people miss out on is like the return on a relationship that you build with the consumer. My my clients are mostly like B2C. So it's yeah, I would say you're hitting it on the head correctly, but then it expands a little bit beyond that too.
I'm just saying, if you like a picture of a dog, does that mean that you are automatically segmented into the audience of people who love dogs?
Yeah, it's a lot of ways to compartmentalize someone because you could have like a million interests. I think people are very complex, but then maybe you have like a million interests, but right now, you, Alex, in this stage of your life, you're looking at like business investments, and maybe that does carry on for like the next, I don't know, until like, until you reach the end. But maybe you also find like different niches in this. And so you have that long-term history behind you just based off of your like really your accounts, your IP and stuff. And then you have some of the short-term things that also you see. Maybe you started getting into sneakers, but then you decided like later this year you're actually not into sneakers like that. But so for this term of this year, you're probably going to have like more of those fun sneaker ads or something as well. But then you stopped looking at it, so you're not going to get hit with those types of ads anymore.
So, for those who don't know how this works, could you elaborate more on how this happens? So, you just scroll through the timeline on your Facebook, Instagram, whatever, and the system records the time that you spend watching a certain piece of information. And from that, it generates a report, or it assigns you to a category of people who are potential clients. And that information is being sold to people who work with advertising.
Exactly. It's it sounds creepier than it might be because I don't believe necessarily that like someone is trying to get us, but our information is out there. So you said it very well. I would also add to that like all of our devices that are connected to like the internet and even some I don't think devices offline, but some places offline because of cameras and stuff. They just have visibility on you, right? They understand certain human profiles, I would say. Maybe they don't necessarily say like Alex does this or Jasmine does this, but it's like, okay, Alex, a guy who lives here and uses this type of car, and same thing for me. Because devices are always listening, if that doesn't sound creepy. But I guess that's part of how to the effect of like consumer behavior, which is a big aspect of what advertising is based off of, like how to make someone tick correctly, not in like a bad way, but in like a let's get them to buy this or get into this and that kind of stuff. It's all part of that kind of like cycle. Um, and to that description that I just mentioned of like devices are always listening, they have so much money that by that, I mean ad agencies and sometimes even like companies themselves. If you think about conglomerates, they're spending money on like research and development to find better ways to target and attract us, at least in the States. I don't know about like internationally because there's also like different laws around the way people get advertised to. Um, but I remember some of the big companies I worked at, they would literally have an entire floor just dedicated to R&D, and we would only see the things that were ready to be like commercialized, not commercialized, sorry, but like sold to some of these different brands that they had as clients. And then of course they probably were working on some like other top secret things, but I remember like one of the things that they had set up, I forgot which company, but they had actually was it Reprise? Reprises. So some of the companies I worked at, even if you looked at my LinkedIn, they're actually sister companies or like smaller companies within the larger conglomerate, right? So Reprise is part of IPG. It got bought out, I don't know, sometime before I started working there. And then Wavemaker was like a merger of two, I forgot the different names because I wasn't there at the time. When I joined Wavemaker, it was like I think their first year as Wavemaker. Um, but anyways, this is just to say they own these conglomerates own a lot of different companies, and some of them have like big research departments, which is great, but it's also like, oh, what's the next way that they plan to target us? So one of the companies was working on, you know how what is it when you talk in front of your around your phones and then you start to get ads and you're like, wait, I didn't actually look for this, but now this is showing me these ads. Like, that was something that was researched and developed, of course. That was something that one of the companies I worked at, they had a R&D department that was using that, and they were like showing us that. And this is before people like actually became a little bit more acclimated to it and would like speak of it. So that was cool, but also kind of like, whoa, this is game changer. Or some stores, I wouldn't say all. Don't think that this is the layout for everything, but some stores also have these special cameras that could kind of capture in a heat sense map your eyeball and like where it's moving to, and that's why certain products are in certain shelves, for instance. Um, and other works like that. I think the craziest one I think I heard of, I didn't get to see it. I never met anyone in this R&D department, but I heard about it through like some pub advertising publisher. It was something around like um I think this is when DVR. I never had one, so I'm like DVR, but DVR became a thing. This one company wanted to put install like small cameras in it, not to record us. And that's the other, sorry, quick caveat. I wouldn't say record us, just like just flag like, oh, this is happening. I don't know if they're actually recording us, but this one company wanted to be able to like monitor through these cameras on like these DVR sets what was going on within, like, let's say this frame to this frame of a room. So let's say your DVR is capturing this, right? And it's right in front of your couch. And this is, I think, the exact example that they used in the report. So if you're sitting on your couch, let's say you have your like spouse or significant other there, and this thing is always on, right? And so maybe you're watching like some funny show, you're watching whatever, it doesn't really matter. But the context is that you and your significant other maybe just sat down and you're still like bickering about something that just happened earlier. And now your DVR sees it, and your commercials are dynamic in that sense. So now your commercials are all attuned to like, oh, go on this relaxing spa or buy these candles, like things that are very like, they're supposed to create a more relaxing environment because it saw that you're like stressed out. Um, I remember reading that that was trying to get pushed through, but I think some lawmaker shot it down. But it's also kind of crazy because, like, I just heard about that because I took a deep dive into like advertising. No one I've ever brought that up to, like coworkers, professors, have ever heard of that, kind of thing. And I'm just like, oh, there's just a lot going on in ways that are gonna, I think, eventually arise as potential ethical issues, but I think right now it seems like some lawmakers are shooting it down, which is nice because that could be really invasive.
Would you say that this profession entails to be flexible in terms of morality, also, if I would be allowed to say it like that? For example, when you have to advocate and sell stuff which you wholeheartedly believe is BS, but it's your job to do that, how do you go around that?
Yeah, I think it'll be different for everyone, right? It's just like, where does your moral compass lie? Um or your values. So that's why I was like super grateful that um my first few jobs around this have all been with things that I believe in. Um At least within, like, the advertising space. I remember, like, in TV ad sales, some of the products, I was just like, "Oh, why are we selling this?" But yeah, in TV ad space, or sorry, in paid search and paid social, it's mostly around things I believe in because of, like, the financial literacy and instruments that we can use. Um, some of the products, maybe not so much, and then that's where I personally was kind of, like, conflicted and would move away from it if possible. the first few like direct to consumer or e-com type of clients or even retail clients that I had were for products that I could actually like stand behind. They were household goods, things that you might need for like washing your clothes, hair products, and not just like dye your hair. It's like, okay, this is use this for hair treatments, kind of things. And so they weren't too overwhelming to me as as a person and like for my values, but there are some. I remember, I won't say names, but I had like some colleague slash friends that at the time when I first started, they were just like, "Oh no, I have this client," and it's like I realized that some people weren't as fortunate. They would definitely have more clients that they weren't necessarily aligned with. Some without saying names, it's hard, but some that had like clients that had entertainment with like animals involved, and they're just like, "Why are we doing this?" And I'm like, "That sucks." But I think it all comes down to like, do you really need it? And then like how that's a tricky question. That's a tricky question because how do you start to say no? For me, it's just always trying to keep in mind like something else will come. There was this one client. It wasn't so much the products being sold, it was just kind of like the treatment within working in that working environment that just seemed kind of toxic to me. And I think I tolerate a lot. I grew up with the notion that most people were probably going to experience that whole like boiler room situation, to say that people are like going to yell at you kind of thing. And I don't think that should be a thing, but for some reason I grew up or have this notion that like people might do that, they will lose their cool, but that doesn't mean you have to. But nonetheless, there was a client that I had to step away from, who I was actually considering going in full time to, and that this was going to be like, I wouldn't have been a millionaire, but I was going to make like the most money, and to say no to that, it was just kind of like a reminder to myself of I can't put a price on myself like that, and this isn't going to align with what I value. And it's in the end, I think if you put yourself through something that you don't believe in, it might just hurt you a little bit more. Maybe you'll last, but you could have spent that time doing something that you wanted to do.
So you do stand more for value than for um, money.
I would say 80-20. 80-20, yeah.
Pareto principle. That's good. What are the most regular challenges that you encounter?
I think the biggest challenge, those could come in different areas. The biggest challenge as a marketing consultant for me has been, well, just in the marketing field, anywhere where you have clients, I would say, is sometimes you're literally being brought in as an expert or as a specialist, whatever the title might be, but you're being brought in to like support this and sometimes even lead it. In my case, most of the times is like to lead the program. And sometimes there's like a difference in opinions of things, which again takes me back to those cricket pasta days of like, okay, so it's more about negotiating, compromise, and sometimes it's tough, but sometimes it does bring you down like a black or white path of like, okay, you either stick to it or you just walk away. I had one client, one of my first clients, she couldn't take on, it's not that she didn't want to, she herself did not have the bandwidth, or I think uh the investment ready to take on some of the strategies I wanted to in order to evolve her as a brand. And so we parted ways after maybe like 5 or 6 months. And then this past, well, this year just started, but like last year, towards the end of last year, when one of my clients had to walk away because they wanted someone full time, and I got offered full time, but I didn't want to take it. So I was just like, oh, what am I gonna do? Like they were my biggest client, and so the client, that first client, came back to me and was just like, I'm ready to do what you said before. I know it's been like a year, but I'm like ready now. And I'm like, amazing. So that's been one of the biggest challenges, just kind of like learning how to
Stand your ground.
yes, yes, exactly. Took the words out of my mouth. Stand your ground on what you think is going to be good for the program. And I think a lot of times it's not as dramatic as like what TV makes it out to be. So it's not. It's not like there's like no sense in what you're saying, or it's like what people in this field are doing is not entirely the definition of innovative. It's just like maybe there's some things that people haven't tried yet that they should try. So between that and then I think sometimes also bandwidth. Um, in my full-time jobs, I typically worked 50 to 60 hours. In my last full-time job, I worked closer to like 60 hours beyond, I would say, like the holiday or like the peak seasons. And so with that in mind, I was just like, oh, I could like fit all these clients now that I have my own time, because like you only sleep like 8 hours a day and I could work through lunch. And so I thought I would maybe be able to, scale myself in that manner, especially if I'm doing like an hourly rate of like, okay, I could work another 60 hours. And it's not the same anymore. I don't have that like same feeling in me of like wanting to necessarily go to 60 hours a week, between that or even the bandwidth of like, okay, I told them that we're only going to work 20 hours a week. Now I'm at 20 hours and I still have to do this other thing that's really important for them. But now I have to communicate with them like, hey, I think I need another 2 or 5 hours, kind of thing. Um, or finding ways to like reprioritize something else just to make sure that they are getting what they need. So I think bandwidth in those two areas of like, I could push myself so I could actually make more money. And also, how do I make sure to maximize my time with them? A lot of it is just sticking to the priorities that you have, but sometimes it's like, okay, this is my priority, but it's connected to this, and they need help in this other thing too now, and so trying to be tactful. I think different clients will present different opportunities of that too.
Do you put anything on the table up front when you engage with a new client? Like, let's say you have a test period where you perform a certain set of services, and if they don't see the results, then you don't work together. Is it a way of starting your own business like this?
The test period is usually around like 2, 3 months. It could vary just based off of what they're comfortable with, their investment levels. This is also a really good question that came up. I'm part of like a bunch of like online forums that talk about this stuff, about like helping each other and whatnot. So someone also asked this is kind of like, how do you gauge that, right? Because one of the number one rules I think I learned in my first job in advertising was like, you can't promise anything, and some people have different opinions on that, but like it's like maybe 90% guaranteed because we assume that people in this field are going to do like not wild things with the money and promise you these wild gains. But so it's about just kind of having a sense of like, okay, what can you maybe promise them? Um, you can't promise them sales if they haven't started anything, because you might have to build awareness. You don't know what that one sale is going to be if they don't have any experience in it. So for anyone who is just starting, it depends on the conversation, but like maybe if you don't actually know where to start, you could start reaching out to people that you meet in person at like businesses that you might attend. I actually did that too. I was taking this like hot yoga class and I ran into the owner who told me that the yoga studio was like brand new. And I was like, by the way, I help out with this stuff. I love this studio. Like, is there any way I could help out? Kind of thing. And it's not so much because I want to make money, especially from a yoga studio, because they probably don't have that much money, but it's like, how can I help you grow? And like, when you're ready, you could hire me. Um, but being able to like leverage that kind of connection, anything that's a genuine connection where you could genuinely help out, I think is your best bet. So if you're starting, it's like, what are you most interested in? I wouldn't say I'm like a yogi, but like I love doing yoga classes. And so like that was a natural area for me to like get into from like a local business standpoint. But if you love shopping from certain places, or this one actually just happened. I sometimes go to these like concerts and festivals, and maybe you would believe, but like some people wouldn't believe how much time and investment and money like some people put into their outfits. And so I started joining some of these forums just to get ideas because I don't have that money to put into the outfits like that, but I'm sure I could maybe, create something inspired by a certain look that I saw. And so I met I virtually met this like woman who like sells certain like clothes for like festivals and concerts, and she has a really small following. So that's another thing. Maybe someone with a small following will be like your best bet to get someone's attention. Um, and I still absolutely love the way that she sews things, and she's like the pattern she uses and et cetera, et cetera. So anytime I get like, I offer her like just free social media help. Most of it is just like reposting and sharing, but sometimes it's also comes down to like, oh, how are you planning out this year? Like how can I help from like a strategy perspective? So the promises are just about like, how can I help you so I could get familiar with your line of work or business. But then also, I think if you're going to talk more about the performance based aspects, like whether it's brand reach or maybe even making those sales, it's about, well, how have they performed in the past? And if there's nothing to speak for that, maybe this is their first time, then maybe using some sort of like industry benchmark, or assessing where they are right now. Like if they have an online presence that has garnered some social clout, then maybe you can get that sale. But it's very contextual, I'd say.
What are the skills that you believe are crucial to do your job?
I would say um, detail oriented, in the sense that you want to make sure that when you're setting up someone's account, you know all the different toggles that you could use so you're not spending $300 in a few hours. But also, you want to just be able to make sure that that money that you are entrusted with is being spent wisely, because you want to create that good rapport. Um, Detail oriented also in the sense that, like, okay, so you know what's going on in your program. Maybe this is more collaborative, actually, collaboration, because you want to be able to collaborate with anyone else that might impact your work. So maybe they have a creative team, or maybe they just have a freelancer that does like the photos for the products. You have to be able to speak to them so that they understand what's working, what's not working from what you're seeing from ads. And maybe it means that you get to repurpose things. Maybe it means that you need to create entirely new creatives. Collaboration, detail, communication, I think is also very important. I think that will just trickle into a lot of areas of life, which is really good. But communication, to make sure that you understand everything that you need to get done in order to actually get it done, and then communicate anything that you might need to get that done. Like asking questions. I was not big on asking questions in the beginning because I was so shy, but I realized that that could put me in a really bad spot. So ask all the questions, and there's things that people don't know that they don't know about. So I think that aspect is resourcefulness then. So just try to get involved anywhere where that conversation might pop up, to get a better sense of what you need to know or what things exist that might make your strategy or your work better.
How do you stay informed? This industry seems to be always fast paced and changing. How do you stay in touch with the trends?
The trends is really interesting because, yeah, they definitely are fast paced, and it's like something new is happening all the time. And their platforms, we work on platforms, by we again, the marketers, we work on platforms that everyone uses, right? So you sometimes hear or see the impacts on these platforms too as like an end user. Like TikTok is growing their shopping division, so they want to take a piece of the cake that Amazon has to offer as like a go-to place for retailers and for shoppers alike. So just with that in mind, keeping a source of different publications. So some for like paid search, paid social. There's like search engine. There are groups on LinkedIn. There are definitely forums like PPC, or I think PPC Hero on like Reddit, which is really good. Or other more nuanced ones like Google Ads, or maybe also like Instagram Marketer. Or if you get into like influencer marketing, like you probably could find that on Reddit or across the web. And then some of these forums too, you might want to just like look into more. There's also, for those that are more into like audio based learning, there's a lot of podcasts out there, which is really nice. I actually don't know them off the top of my head, but there are some podcasts out there that I listen to just just to stay in the know. Marketing Brew is one that just overall gives you like good information of things to pay attention to, and a lot of news around like social platforms come about there too, sometimes advertising in general. And then if you're trying to get more into like direct to consumer, there are D2C blogs out there that you could subscribe to, and there's a lot of like newsletters that will provide you with information just to help you be a more well-rounded marketer. There's also books. I know that might seem ancient, but if you get into specific types of marketing, those will give you like good fundamentals. The same way that like some older books like um what is it? Think Rich, Grow Rich or something like that. Is that was
Yeah.
okay. Well, that's like a older book, but like it teaches good lessons on like leadership and business strategy and investment styles.
This profession seems to be a mix of marketing, data science, sales, customer service, social behaviors. There is so much under the hood. What would be a good starting point for someone interested in this field? Where would you advise to begin from?
Yeah, I would assess what your interests are. Um, and I think you mentioned some of the categories really perfectly. So rewind and rewatch. But maybe try to identify your strengths and how it aligns to one of those. So for me, because I started to notice I wanted to work more with Excel, but I wouldn't say I'm a data wizard. I'm good at what I do for my job with the data, but I'm not like I don't build SQL. I'm not like a coder, you know. I thought at first just because I liked Excel that I would, and I love learning languages, so it's just like maybe I'll learn like coding languages, but at the end of the day, like that's really not me. So try to interview for some of those, not a lot, only a handful, and then I realized like, oh, this is not me. So I would say just focus on some of your interest. From there, try to figure out like where they might align with some of those different categories that Alex kindly mentioned. But let's say like I personally like talking a lot to people. And so client services, I think, is just one of them. Sometimes I'll talk to some clients, and like one client I actually just started interviewing with, they're just like, "Oh, we have this. You could fulfill this role on the client speaking side or on the back end side where you don't speak to the client." But they were like, "But I think you probably want to speak to clients." I'm like, "Okay, you could just tell, and if you can't tell, someone else can." In that sense, so figure out like what you're interested get started in that. And if that doesn't work, I think you'll be able to tell right off the bat within like a month or so and try the next thing that comes along.
Do you think that this profession may be replaced by artificial intelligence?
I think parts of the profession will be. That's my okay. The most controversial thing I guess I would say is like, yes, we definitely can be, but I think it'll evolve what the players right now are doing to doing something else. Like,
If I would break it down to what you do is you identify the opportunity, you hear your clients, you create a strategy, you set up the engine on those platforms, whatever they are, and you identify what kind of platform is it that you're going to look in, because not all platforms, I may assume, are suitable for all products. So you go through all these steps, and at the end of the day, it is your knowledge of the system and how it works that, in my understanding, counts the most. If you get AI to explain, and it does a perfect job at explaining already now, do you think that there is a high risk of this profession being substituted by AI?
um, I love how you just really relate all of that. That was really well for someone who's never heard of this. Um, yeah, for sure. We're actually kind of seeing it now. So, one big issue, not issue, one big thing that came about last year with Google Ads, where a lot of people spend money. I think you could literally look at the finances of Google because it's a public company or Alphabet, whatever, um, and see how much money they're spending towards like marketing or even how much money they're getting from advertising, right? So a large percentage of their money has been coming through that. There have been other, I forgot who exactly, but they seemed reputable, reputable commenters on advertising in the space where uh, someone mentioned that like some companies such as Google are making most of their revenue, or at that time, from advertising, and they want to scale back because they want to have more control over that, right? You're giving someone too much control if you're saying like I'm getting all my money from you. And like if it's over 50%, I think some one of the CEOs I've worked with said like over 30%, but let's say over 50% just to be fair. Um then you're giving that part of the business more leverage, and it's kind of like how do we get a better sense of control. um and to that, I think, yeah, I think AI will come about. Sorry, so I was about to start a story about last year. Performance Max came about within Google Ads. And for those that aren't too familiar, Performance Max is supposed to be like a search 2.0. Um, sorry, shopping 2.0. So before Performance Max, we had the ability to create like product listed ads. So any of the ads that appear under your Google search bar that have products that have like this is on sale, this is this or that. And so some of those products now have not the same capability of like ad placement just being where they show up as an ad, right? They're supposed to have like a better ad placement is what we're sold as, or the message that we're being sold at to. And that is actually leaning a lot more on like AI. And the AI capabilities are supposed to now determine where the ad is placed, uh, more of the targeting. You could enter some information to help the signals, but ultimately you can't read what's going on. And so that in itself has created a bit of a discussion around like transparency even for the advertisers, because now we don't have as much control as we used to on some of these ad placements. And because of the introduction and really like advertisers being forced to move to Performance Max from the last shopping campaign. The last shopping campaign was like it was literally called Smart Shopping. It was only product listed ads, and you had control over, I would say, some audience, not keyword. It's not keyword based, but it's based off of your history. So if you're looking into like blue T-shirts versus black denim or something, they're not going to give you like hot pink denim. So between all of that, I think that has been like a clear wake up call. And if not, it should be a clear wake up call to advertisers that like AI is coming and they're building them out with all these algorithms that we can't read into. So I think that's kind of it goes to show with, especially because like a lot of our partners on Google side don't have any other information to give us outside of like this is it basically is what it is. So yes, I do think AI is coming. I think now because AI is created by humans or maybe by other AIs, um, at least we still have the grace of being able to choose AIs in a sense. Like we don't personally get to choose them, but there are a lot that exist, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So it can't necessarily be taken like our roles aren't necessarily going to be taken away because AIs aren't perfect yet. But maybe in the next 50 years, instead of us having to do my day-to-day job, it's mostly like, okay, let me just see what this AI is spitting out. And maybe it already generates a report with like a green happy face versus like a frowny sad face or something, and like but I think for now we'll still have our job. We just have to learn how to manage the AI, um, and get the best results from it, which is a bit tricky right now in its early stages.
How do you find your clients?
My clients have mostly just been referral. And in terms of finding it, I think it's just kind of like putting yourself out there. So I told some people that I know, which is nice that they were able to offer me these referrals.
How do you find your clients if we're not talking about references?
Yeah. So I haven't been as successful, but some of the things I've tried that I've seen online or some of my mentors have told me, it's you want to put yourself out there online. A lot have recommended like try Fiverr or anything like that, or maybe even I think there's like specific websites for them. I'm not sure off the top of my head. Or looking at like LinkedIn and just finding like part-time jobs. I've done a lot of those. I've done the Fiverr bit, but I think Fiverr and maybe some other platforms like Fiverr are very competitive. So you get people from around the world that are willing to do what you do for like $5, $10. Maybe they don't do it that well, or I don't know what the case is because I haven't tried it, but um, they have like a very great low price penetration strategy, which I can't commit to because yeah, that then I might as well, like, literally work at, like, a coffee house or something nearby, which I don't oppose to, but I'm just saying, like, if I wanted to make more money from my career, it wouldn't make sense. I think mostly those would be the best way. There are some places out there that I think are kind of like headhunters that should be helpful. There's one I was trying to work with, it's like creative agency, creative assist or something like that. And they're supposed to help you find like part-time placements as a contractor. So there's one brand I remember looking at working for, I think it was like Colgate or something. Um, and some reasons why someone like a Colgate might want someone as part-timer isn't for like a full term kind of part-time. It's mostly because maybe someone's on like maternity or paternity leave or something, so or maybe something else has happened, but they need someone for like the short interim. So it's mostly been, yeah, those are other outlets I think that exist. I haven't found them so far to be as beneficial. So I highly recommend referrals.
How do you build up a portfolio? And how do you showcase a portfolio?
Working on a portfolio, I think it's just a matter of collecting a lot of the tried and true lessons. I actually haven't fully built out a portfolio for the paid search social side because of the referral basis of my clients. But I started to branch out into also like content marketing, so that I have started to build a portfolio. And again, just looking at like what is working, what's not. Um, in that area, try to look at it from like a business standpoint. And most businesses will be looking at a series of similar performance metrics. So, and you could find this like online too if you ever doubted what I'm saying or like maybe have your own ideas or just want someone else's opinion. But online, I found myself that like within content marketing, if you can have like a pretty good average like engagement rate, that's really good. And I know from the marketing side, when I've worked with like influencers or people who do social media marketing and content managers, like I am looking for people who can relay some sort of like performance out of what they do, because it's not just about like take a pretty photo or take this like really cool looking video. It's about like, okay, well, do you know what performed from it? Can you kind of like help relay that to me? Because if I'm someone hiring on that end, I want to know if I could use what they have. And if you're not willing to do that, I'm sure I could find someone else that can, because it is kind of like a saturated field. So just knowing how to relay a story around some of the things that worked. And if it didn't, I probably wouldn't include that in your portfolio. But most of mine have been just like around like, oh, this has worked. And here are different uh, different industries that I may have helped with for that in particular.
What do you find most rewarding about your job?
Rewarding aspect, I would say, is I love helping people. I don't think I can perform surgery or anything like that or build you a rocket ship, but I do love to be able to help people in any way. So, one thing that I'm still trying to figure out how to do in a scalable way is just being able to help smaller businesses. Um, because I think a lot of these big companies already have a lot of money, which is fine. I'm happy to work with some of them too if I'm given the chance. But I learned so much that I think could help smaller businesses that are just trying to spend like a few hundred or $1,000 on this, just to help them see if that's something else that they want to further like pursue and evolve. I think that's been rewarding. And then also the people I get to work with has been rewarding. So oftentimes if I get to like manage a team or even just work with like a leader or someone that has like a career that's bigger than mine, like if I can be there to support them professionally, um, and be an ear if they need to vent something, like I'm totally for it. There were some some folks on a team I was working on that I think didn't feel valued. Um, Even though when I would talk to like the client who hired me about their performance and just kind of like their workload because it impacted my workload, we never said anything bad about them. But yet, for some reason, I feel like when I interacted with them, I got a sense that they felt undervalued. So just making sure that people are seen because at the end of the day, we are people. And I think that makes a world of a difference when it also comes to like curating the best team that you want. It's just making sure people feel like they're in a good place.
How does a perfect client look for you?
I would say the perfect client is then someone who is willing to be open minded about things. Again, it's not like I'm going to throw a million crazy tactics and see if one sticks. It's like a lot of is tried and true. And a lot of nuances within that particular client might call for something newer. But again, it's something that we can build test around and get really specific around like what's details within that strategy might be beneficial for the client. And in that, build, test, and be open to it. I think that's really important. And just for collaboration as well. Um, in my scope of work, yeah, I might mostly just do paid search or paid social or maybe just content. But a lot of that isn't like we can't look at it in a siloed manner. A lot of it's impacted by something else. So if that means I could give you maybe some general feedback on your website, to make sure that the SEO is ranking correctly, or maybe to make sure that we're not overlaying on keywords that we're targeting. Because that'll help you reinvest what dollars you don't spend in my program elsewhere. I think it all kind of comes together nicely when you do have like an open mind and are open to collaboration.
If someone would be considering a profession in marketing, what advice would you give to those people?
So, to anyone considering marketing out there, I would say figure out what your strengths are so you could really hone in on that because marketing can be super big and encompassing. Like I was mentioning, I am not like I'm good with data sets and working on Excel, but I'm not like a tech data whiz.
You
But you
wish you
could
were?
in a sense maybe. But I think if I was like no, I'll go off on a tangent later. I was gonna say if I was a whiz, maybe I'd be more of like a scientist. I wanted to at some point work with like nanotechnology because I wanted to create like invisible cloaks. But no, if I yeah, I think it's important to do that because you could spend a lot of time doing something that you're not good at, and then you start to wonder like, why am I not excelling in this? Why am I not getting the job, or why am I not getting a promotion if you got your foot through the door, right? Um, so getting honing in on like what your strength is. Second to that, being ready to ask questions, I think makes a world of a difference. A lot of the associates I got to train that ask a lot of questions, I think their career has developed in bigger ways than ones that weren't really trying to ask questions. And I think that could also be a little bit of a like an indicator, like, are you actually interested in this or not? To like kind of go that extra mile to be curious about it. Um, and also within marketing, I would say really with any field, but just try to visualize like what would you imagine being like your perfect day or routine at like a job, And you could try to get specific if you could do that. But I think my role within paid advertising, especially within like the full time that now led to my consulting days, it really became like my dream job because I was after college, I got some experience and like right after college I got some experience, but then when I was trying to figure out like where would I be willing to or what would I be willing to do for like the next, I don't know, 10, 40, 50 years of my life? Um, and it could just be the next like 5 or 10 years, right? But for me, it was like, I want to work with more projects. I want to work more on Excel, and I want something that's fast paced. I want to be in an environment that's always evolving. In the nature of like the digital space I'm in, it's always evolving. Um, so all these characteristics I started to realize like, oh, this is my perfect job. This is literally what I asked for. So that got me in a good place. Now it's just kind of like I had to reassess that, like what do I want next? But I think if you want marketing, you'll excel if you have that detail orientation within you, and you're just kind of open to learning from others as well.
Jasmine, thank you for this conversation and your time. It was a pleasure speaking to you today.
Thank you. This was awesome. I really enjoyed.
Thank you for watching. A great deal of effort has gone into creating this content. To support our mission, please check out the links in the description below. And until then, I will see you next time. Stay curious, stay unbound.